This show is brought to you by Safety FM.
On Friday, I was at the International Conference on Climate Change. It was sponsored by the Heartland Institute, a think tank. We interviewed some very interesting people, including... Here, let me see. I have to go through the interviews, right? No, I got home. I'm hitting the ground running here. We had a lot of clients out there that I'm catching up on here. So we interviewed, here, I'll get you his name. We interviewed Christopher Monckton, the third Viscount Monckton of Brunchley. So he is a hereditary peer from England. What he is, right? So I think, okay, I'll be upfront here. I've been studying the global warming thing since 1986. I think there's a lot of questions that have not been asked of what has become the mainstream global warming folks, right? So I was able to secure an interview at this event with the leader of the, and they call him, many different things. Denying climate change. Doesn't deny climate change. He's this, they're attacking him personally a lot of times. Some may be warranted or not. I don't know. I'm not here to judge anybody here. But he brings up some very, some points and everything else to the other side of this issue. And we have some other folks also that came on in the middle of this issue. We also have somebody who's talked about earthquakes. So I have a lot of interviews here. I have to edit down and everything else for content and also for time, mostly for time. So as you know, I normally don't edit any of the interviews down the times I do the interviews. So that's what's going on here. And he was able to connect a lot of the dots for me in this study, in his ongoing studies of these issues. So a lot going on out here. I also wanted to thank Ian Punnet of Coast to Coast AM and all the other people that sent some very kind words and listened to the program on February 17th or 18th, depending on your time zone. It's a late night / early morning program, depending on where you live. And I wanted to thank him personally and give a shout out to him. I had a lot of fun. They kept me on for 2 hours. So we covered the East Palestine, Ohio train wreck out there. And since the 17th, now it's the 27th, so 10 days later, we're into this. Some other information came out and stuff, and we're going to talk about that in a few minutes here. So what were some of the takeaways? I had 7 takeaways here, right? Number 1, the authorities did not necessarily make bad choices. They did not have any good choices to manage the situation. Number 2 is that so that had to do with the controlled burn out there. Though I might have made the same decision. They're dealing with the same information, the same equipment, the same circumstances. So, and I really hate to second guess the people in the field, the people closest to the problem. As we know, that's always been my attitude. But as far as HOP is concerned, human organizational performance, the people in the field are the experts, and they're the ones who give context to these situations. Number 2, it is difficult to make a decision how clean is clean. So, for example, you have lead-based paint. There are interior standards for lead-based paint dust, all right, when you're doing the cleanups and everything else. So the question is this, how clean is clean with any of this? How do you know? I'm working on a toxicology class for one of my clients right now, teaching it, and this is one of the things. The reality of the situation is, let me give you some statistics here. The well, I'm calling that up. I don't have it in here. They do not have exposure standards for most materials out there. Oh, really? Yeah, they don't really have exposure standards for most materials here. So when you're thinking about this stuff, right, the number of substances with a permissible exposure limit, that's the regulatory limit set by OSHA, is roughly around 500. Number of substances with an REL, that's recommended exposure limit from NIOSH, is 677. The EPA regulates 187 hazardous air pollutants, and there are 6 national ambient air quality standards. The ACGIH has roughly, let me see, how many TLVs are there? I'm looking this up, right? Allow. Okay, so roughly about the same amount, right? Several hundred. And they also have right. There are some standards for, not from the ACGIH necessarily, but some of the other agencies out there for what's safe on a surface. And let's remember, if you all have the same target organ, right, you still have all that. You have to run through the additive formula, which I'm not going to do on the air here. And for that, to see whether you're above, unless you're above a, what do you call it? Determine whether you're above the exposure limits. So you would go out and you'd use the formula and run the numbers on the additive formula, figure that out if you have the same target organ. Now, if you're a CSV or CIH or CHST or OHST, it's all on the body of knowledge, the rubric on there. So you can look it up, toxicology. But anyway, so there are no real standards there. And then you're also dealing with chemical sensitivities, genetics, psychological things. These people have been traumatized out there. They got thrown out of their home. There's uncertainty and everything else thrown in there. So you got people freaking out here. All right, understandably freaking out, which may be adding to some of this these things out there. Number 3, some chemicals are heavier there, and therefore the bulk amount of the material might settle in low places. And might, I use that in air quotes, like basements and sewers, and a controlled burn eliminates that hazard. But now we have other hazards. So as of right now, no one died or no one got hurt. No, so actual hurt. However you want to define that. And Todd Conklin mentions that hurt means a lot of different things. But I tell you what, cleaning up this stuff, if you're a first responder, poses a lot of risk. All right, we're dealing with a flammable material, a hazardous material, and everything else. It's so you might have an issue here with first responders getting hurt and immediately getting hurt. So perhaps a controlled burn was the correct thing to do. Something else, a definition of safety. We always talk about that. What's the definition? If you're ever going to attend one of my safety classes, you're going to have a thing there. 0 accidents, 0 illnesses, 0 injuries. Likely nothing will ever be safe. Safety is capacity, resilience, and the presence of controls or safeguards. All right, so get rid of that. Joe Pena off of LinkedIn, she posts, and a lot of people who follow this program also follow her on LinkedIn. Right? What do you do now? What do you do? You have none of these accidents, none of these statistics that we're going to be. What do you track? There are other things you track. And let's remember, if something, you may say, well, something's intangible. Well, it's tangible if you can prove that it can be measurable. Nothing, intangibles are not measurable, so they don't really exist, right? It's very subjective. But if you can prove, that tangibles, if you can prove tangibles do exist, then they do exist. intangibles exist, they do exist. So attitude, corporate culture, anxiety, turnover rate, things of that nature. Now, according to OSHA, you have to track, all of this stuff. Yeah, you do. But you never want to be the person on that sign that turns everything back to 0 or back to 1. And when you have those signs, 0 accidents, 0 illnesses, 0 injuries, guess what? Now do you want to be the guy or person to turn that back to 0? Something else that I found out, I was contacted by some people in the railway industry who heard the interview and who spoke to me. And I want to thank them personally here. I can't mention their name. That we mentioned that there are 1,500 derailments per year. The number is actually a lot higher because of this. Ooh, really? Yeah, so a derailment, it's not necessarily, you think a derailment, you're thinking about cars going in piles and this and that. Then that's not necessarily it. It's whenever the wheels come off the track. So that happens all the time. Happens a hell of a lot more than 1,500 times a year. Those go unreported. So we know those are underreported. So they got into this here with this, right? And if that happens, then that's got to be reported, filed the accident report, the whole 9 yards. It's a very laborious nightmare thing. So there's an incentive there not to report this stuff. All right. Number 6, we need a thorough investigation of this incident so you do not make bad policy decisions that won't be effective or be appropriate. So the NTSB already has released some preliminary stuff that there was an issue with one of the axles on the train. Thankfully, the train engineer, the train operator, was not speeding, and I'm assuming it's a he because the report said he. The report I read said he attempted to stop the train, and that's when the derailment happened. So the whole thing is liability and fault. Right? Fault is a very imprecise word. Some people are like, the railway is at fault. This person's at fault. Well, most likely, right, from what I've read, the train company is liable for this. It's their train. But fault, now what does that really mean? And yes, it's their equipment, it malfunctioned and everything. But what does that? But it could be a manufacturing defect. It could be any number of things that led to this accident, right? And blame I was going to put this up on the internet, right? The new Star Trek Picard, the closing credits, they have this thing, blame no one, right? Blame is ineffective, something along those lines in the end credits, right? Okay, it's their fault. Okay, what the hell do we do with it from there? Well, what happened? That doesn't answer what happened. Was this human error? Was this a manufacturing defect? Was this a maintenance issue? What was this that happened here? We don't know. Let's figure that out. And there were workarounds on the regulations for this stuff also. I haven't read them personally, but from my sources, there are workarounds on all this stuff with maintenance and fixing things and whatever and inspections. There's workarounds that people normally do that are perfectly legal, and it's the industry standard. So that's how it is. So number 7, the more information is always better. Right, so you have more information. We talk about with HOP, right, where we have that. No, it's not that we don't collect statistics. Yeah, we may collect statistics, but we want to know when bad things happen. We want to know all this stuff. Well, when all this bad stuff happens, because if you do not have the information. Hold on, I got people calling me and texting me and everything else. All right. So I apologize there. I know that's rude. You're the one listening here. So you have all this information coming in. What are you going to do with it? Now, there's been talk. Well, the government should have all this information. This should have been reported. Well, they were according to the information I have, they weren't over the threshold for the next level of reporting. So all of the cars had their UN numbers, right, the DOT numbers on them, and there was a manifest that went with the train. But that was pretty much it. So that was all they were required to do. If they would have put more trains together here, or maybe loaded the cars differently, then this might have kicked into something else. Okay, well, you have this train going 47 miles an hour through rural Ohio. Explain to me what the government's going to do with that information. All right. Okay, maybe that when something happens, okay, well, we know that this train is out there. Are they going to follow the train with a hazmat crew, with a helicopter? Oh, we're going to find this thing out and follow it. What are they going to do? Are they okay? But you're generating all this info. Maybe they'll be able to plan better. How's that? Maybe if they plan now we take this information, we're able to plan better. Maybe stage equipment where we know that our hazardous materials and our highly hazardous materials do go on this route or this route and this route in this area. These are the areas that we have identified that are danger zones. Maybe give more training to the first responders through where this is going, through a population center. Something. Okay, now we have more information. Now we're able to do something with it. But just generating more information, I don't know what for it to be a warehouse. What was the latest information that was warehouse that, thanks to NBC News, was discovered? We talked about it here. Come on, what was it? The power grid. Right? There are people who are experts in power grid that don't have that information. We found that out on Friday with one of the interviews. All right. That's still almost like a quarantine information that only us safety people know. And if you're a listener to this program, you know about that. Threats to the power grid. Right. So that was more or less. Now, what do you do with the info? What are you gonna do with it? That's all questions there with that. So since we're on this, let's continue with some of this stuff, and I have my cat here. All right, once again in on the action. So let's take a break for a second here. Let me compose myself and set up the next thing.
In the professional safety community, communication and planning are just a few keys to your program's success. The question many practitioners have is, where do I start? Dr. Jay Allen, the creator of the Safety FM platform and host of the Rated R Safety Show, has built a global foundation to help you along the way. Go to safetyfm.com and listen to some of the industry's best and most involved professionals, including Blaine Hoffman with the Safety Pro, Sam Goodman with the Hop Nerd, Sheldon Primus with the Safety Consultant, Jim Pozell with Safety Wars, Emily Elrod with Unapologetically Bold, and many others. As individuals, we can do great things, but as a team, we become amazing. Dial into safetyfm.com today and surround yourself with a powerful force of knowledge and support.
OSHA recordables, first aid cases, catastrophic losses. You want answers? So do I. This is Jim Pozell with Safety Wars. Okay, so we are back here. All right, so we're continuing with our ongoing coverage of the East Houston, Ohio train derailment. So I'm as part of my preparation for the program on Coast to Coast, I went through all the air sampling and water sampling data and everything that was released then. A rather extensive thing with that. And like I said, we have 4 questions that we have to answer here with this. And with any type of emergency response, and you're dealing, it could be with water contamination, air contamination, radiation, anything like that. All right. There are 4 questions that you need to answer. And you want to write this down. All right. Number 1, is the air, water, or what have you safe? Number 2, what are you basing that on? Is it a standard, opinion, what have you? What were the chemicals? Number 3, that's the 3rd question. And number 4, did they actually go out there and sample for that? What's the math, sampling? What is it? Now, to their credit, the emergency responders, the state of Ohio, I believe it's called the Ohio EPA, and all these other agencies have done a pretty darn good job with reporting things. So I have the latest update. It has not been updated for today, but it was updated as of last night. So you go to the EPA.gov website, and there is a link prominently in the top of the page. And let me, in case they take this down. And I'm just going to read right off of this. Here. And it's pretty good. So EPA continues, this is from February 26, 2023, air monitoring and indoor air screening. And I'm going to go and comment on this. EPA continues real-time air monitoring and collecting air samples throughout the community. All right. Air monitoring and sampling will continue until removal of heavily contaminated soil in the derailment area is complete and odors subside in the community. EPA also continues to assist in indoor air screenings to homes. To date, 578 homes have been screened with no exceedances for residential air quality standards. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to highlight residential air quality standards. We're going to go to this, residential air quality standards. And here we have indoor air quality, right, from the EPA. By the way, we're going to do this in video very shortly on this. And my question would be to them, what specific indoor air quality standards are they talking about with this? All right. Just to say, residential air quality standards. What are they? What are those? What are you sampling for? All right. And I have right here typical indoor air quality pollutants, and they have a whole list here. All right. Biological, carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, dust, environmental tobacco smoke, fine particulate matter, lead, nitrogen oxides, pesticides, radon, and other volatile organic compounds. Right. With that. So normally what the rule of thumb is, unless otherwise stated, it's 10% of the lowest occupational exposure limit, divide by 2, and because you have a 2-to-1 safety margin, and that is your standard. That's the rule of thumb that in lieu of any other standard that is often out there. So So that's what I would always ask is, what are they doing? Again, public drinking water. East Palestine public drinking water testing results confirm there is no indication of risk to the East Palestine public water system customers. Treated drinking water shows no detection of contaminants associated with the derailment. Good. It's public drinking water that's sampled at the water source, right? Leaving the plant. That gets sampled. All right, residential private well sampling. The Columbiana County Health District continues to sample private water wells. To date, a total of 121 wells have been sampled in Ohio and Pennsylvania. Okay, so here's my question. What were the results? Right? So, again, you have the public water system, right, coming from a water treatment plant, and then you have a private one. What are the results? And they say that they go on to these. And then soil, right? So EPA continues to support Ohio EPA in the state's ongoing and future cleanup activities for the incident, including water quality efforts. EPA collected soil and sediment samples at the derailment site for analysis for volatile organic compounds, semi-volatile organic compounds, aka base neutrals, gasoline range organic compounds, that's usually BTEX, benzene, toluene, ethylbenzene, and xylene, diesel range organic compounds, and oil range organic compounds. And they're referring you over to the Ohio EPA. Waste disposal. EPA issued a directive to Norfolk Southern on Friday, February 24th, to accelerate cleanup of the train derailment site. Under this February 24th directive, waste disposal plans, including disposal, location, and transportation routes for contaminated waste, are subject to EPA review and approval moving forward. So the EPA is standing in here, right? This directive is an important step in the transition from a state-led emergency response phase in the response to an EPA-led cleanup phase. All right, so there's a transition. This is going from local to fed. All right. EPA has decades of experience dealing with hazardous waste, both from cleaning up contaminated sites to regulating the landfills where it's disposed of. As we continue to identify EPA-certified facilities that can accept this waste, some of the liquid waste will be sent to a facility in Vickery, Ohio on February 27th, that's today, where it will be disposed of in an underground injection well. Tomorrow morning, Norfolk Southern will also begin shipping solid waste to their Heritage Incinerator in East Liverpool, Ohio. This means the cleanup can continue at a rapid pace. EPA will continue working with the railroad and our state and local partners to identify other solid waste locations. So air sampling and monitoring. Air sampling and monitoring are two different methods of looking at air quality. Air sampling involves collecting air sample over a period of time, aka time-weighted average, that is sent to the laboratory for analysis to identify and quantify specific compounds. Air monitoring uses electronic devices to provide real-time, meaning instant readings of airborne contaminants. So typically and we're going to look here, typically what happens is with this, they have different you'll see they look like little birdhouses. They're usually aluminum and they're around, and they're able to put air through a sample medium, usually some kind of charcoal or other treated medium, right, granular medium for organic compounds that are in vapor phase or that are in vapor or gaseous phase, and they send that out for analysis. Now, air monitoring is a little bit less precise. Often with air monitoring, what happens is you're going to identify classes of compounds. So, for example, volatile organic compounds, that's a class of compounds. You could also have Draeger tubes, which are, that's a brand name, but they're colorimetric tubes. I'll use a generic. So these colorimetric tubes are tubes that you run air through, and it gives you a near real-time reading, right? So, for example, a benzene tube, you have to pump it like 20 times to get down to the very low exposure limits for benzene, so the PEL is 1 part per million. So every one of those pumps usually takes about 20. Each one of those pumps takes about a minute. So that's so you're looking at 20 minutes roughly for one sample. That's the best you could do. Normally, a lot of times what they would do on a job like this, since, believe me, there's a lot of money involved here, they go and they sample things and what is called a gas chromatograph in the field, where they're able to run all this stuff through a chromatograph, and that a machine that measures individual spikes on like a strip chart recorder, except it's all done electronically now, right? You don't get the old-fashioned strip chart like we used to use way back in olden times, right? And then you're able to identify exactly what the monitoring is, what the contaminant is. So here we go. Air monitoring, that was done. US EPA has deployed mobile detection equipment and stationary equipment to conduct air monitoring at the East Palestine community. So they have mobile equipment, they have stationary equipment, they have all different types of stuff out there with that, right? It's a long, drawn-out thing that I need visuals for it. US EPA collected field measurements for lower explosive limits, LEL, also known as lower flammable limits. So that's the in air, right? That's a general screening monitor where in air you're going to have, you're going to measure all of the explosives in the air, and it's going to measure at what level you are of the explosive limit. Usually the limit is set at 10, not to exceed 10% of that limit. So for example, for methane, the lower explosive limit is 50,000. So you're not allowed to go above 5,000 on the monitors, and that's a prohibited condition. Total volatile organic compounds, VOCs, that's a general, right? It's a whole class, and it all depends on how it's set up. I would imagine that they have a higher energy bulb on there. And I'm also, bulb is called a photoionization detector. But in this case, they probably are using what is called a flame ionization detector. So photoionization detector uses a ultraviolet light that pulls air across it, right? A sample of air over it, through it. This is all real time. And it ionizes the air, and you're able to measure that ionization. And you get a total level of volatile organic compounds. A flame ionization detector, which is probably what they're also using out there, uses a hydrogen flame to do the same thing. All right? Then you have a hydrogen sulfide detector. That's in there, right? Benzene, hydrocyanide, hydrogen chloride, phosgene. Those are, I believe they have sensors for all of those. If not, they're using, like I said, with the colorimetric tubes. But I find that, hard to believe. And particulate matter. So air monitoring locations were selected at schools, residential areas, several government buildings, upwind of the derailment area. Why would you do it upwind? Because maybe there's air pollution coming in from elsewhere. That happens on a lot of the jobs out there that I've been on, where they're in an industrialized area, and there are things coming in from upwind. You always sample upwind in the derailment area and downwind of the derailment area. So in the derailment area, that makes sense. You can figure that out. Why do you want to do it downwind? See what's coming off the site and to set up an exclusion zone with that. And to relate that to the community. So air sampling. The EPA is collecting outdoor air samples for VOCs, that's target contaminants of concern list, and tentatively identify compounds, including vinyl chloride, N-butyl acrylate, and ethyl hexyl acrylate. Yay, I pronounced everything right. Air sampling locations were selected upwind in the derailment area, the work area, and downwind areas. So they're probably collecting personal samples where the employees are wearing, and also other stuff. So here we have, and I'll mention it's indoor air quality screening. The US EPA has assisted indoor air screening in more than 500 homes under a voluntary screening program offered to residents within the evacuation zone. So they're probably not going to be releasing that sample data online for any of this private stuff. I'd be really surprised. But typically, when I do indoor air quality screening, and what I would be doing is SUMA canister, or what more commonly is called whole gas sampling. And what it is it's a cylinder. It's about half the size of your propane cylinder in your grill, right, for the outside grill, or for heaters, things of that nature. And rather than putting propane in it, what they do is they create a vacuum and they put a valve on there. So they're able to draw in a certain amount of air into that. Then they take that to the lab over usually 24 hours, and it could be less or more, but normally 24 hours. And they take that sample and they send it out to a lab for analysis. Very expensive, very expensive. They're probably paying close to 2 G's for one of those if they're using those in the home. That's what I would be doing for that, with that. And I'd also would be screening homes that are not impacted in that area, that are not upwind of this whole situation. So I would have a reference point of what's going on in the other homes in the community. I would also determine what's going on outside and also inside. So typically these whole gas samples, when you're doing indoor air quality stuff, you want to measure inside and outside. So you have a reference in there, because then you're able to see, well, look, what's going on the inside is not what's going on the outside. And is there previous contamination here? Or is this something that we didn't see? And you're able to figure out and more information. And they are examined by qualified people, usually not all the time, usually a certified industrial hygienist, possibly a toxicologist and maybe an environmental toxicologist or other public health official with that. But this is where, you get the really high-end science folks that are involved in there. So the EPA has a link for reviewing air sampling data. And they have here we go. They have a dashboard. They have a GIS system here with this of all the air sampling locations. And according to this, they are using, look at this. They have a complete list of contaminants here that they are running here. So they are using sorbent tubes, which is they're running air through a tube and sending that for analysis. Suma canister, which is what I just described, whole gas sampling, and Tedlar bag, which is in the field. They analyze in the field through a gas chromatograph, where they take an air sample in, and it looks like a Ziploc bag, but it's sealed and it has a valve on top, and they put it into a device that is similar to an iron lung. You could Google iron lung. And they fill up the bag with air, right? With the air in the ambient environment, all right? And at least that's the way we used to do it back in the day. We used basically an iron lung, small one, in a Pelican case. They draw an air sample in there, and they're able to do an analysis of that through the gas chromatograph out there. So, and they have the lab results. So, let's see. I'm going to zoom in here. Okay. And it's all here. So here are the lab results. For 111 trichloroethane, non-detect. For 1122 tetrachloroethane, not detected. 11, and it goes on. I'm looking non-detect. Trichlorofluoroethane, 0.46 micrograms, so that's 1. And no, you could go here, and I'm not going to give an opinion here, but I would go and, I would go here. It's I tell you what, I'm very impressed with what I'm seeing here. We're going to have to do a zoom here of this. And they have multiple air samples here and reporting here. I'm impressed. They got their stuff together. I say that. I'm going to say that about the EPA. And they have multiple analytes here. So, okay. So, incredible. And here I have a comma separated value. It's all here. All right, so let's go back to, I know this is boring. Now we have water sampling data. And they have water sampling data. Hold on. Water sampling data. I'm impressed with them. All right. And they ran their sample methods, free product, or streamer river. Free product means the actual stuff, right? And if there was a skim, a sheen, or something like that, or in the water, you were able to get what is called an aqueous phase, right? So you have, in this case, it would be called a denappled, dense, non-aqueous phase liquid, right? That would be from vinyl chloride. That would be a sinker, right? And then you have a non-aqueous phase liquid. That would be the floater of that. I think that's, memory serves me right, that's what it is. Don't quote me on that. I know, I just said it on the radio. So is it a sinker or a floater? And they're going to be sampling that. And they have a whole bunch of stuff here that they analyzed for. You can look it up on the EPA website. And here you have soil and sediment data. Boy, some attorney's going to have, some consultant's going to make a lot of money here. And now, I'm going to say this. This is something else that I don't think was mentioned on the news. They have Taggart Street here in East Palestine, Ohio. All right. On Palestine Street, there are there are like 3 hazardous waste sites on that street. So my question is this, is why they're doing all the sampling. Was the contamination they're seeing, if any at all, coming from these hazardous waste sites? I'm sure there's a lot of consultants out there sweating bullets right now, hoping that they did the cleanup appropriately. And they right. And I'm sure there's people from Norfolk Southern saying, holy mackerel, we may be head up with cleaning up other people's messes. That might happen also. Something, in the background. So, going on out here. That's what I'm famous for, apparently. Right, almost famous. So, again, a lot of air monitoring data, everything else. You can have a field day here. If you want to hire me to look over the air monitoring data, you can call me at 845-269-5772. I'll do an in-depth thing, right? An in-depth analysis of it. So, and they have a slideshow here of the scene. Very interesting. So they are using real-time monitors for benzene, apparently. Okay, great. So that's what we got there. All the data's there. If I was an Ohio resident right now, I'd be very proud of the way that they're handling this. As far as, I don't know about, safe or not safe, but as far as the amount of data that they're generating, I'd be very proud. I think they're doing a great job with this stuff. But the thing is, this is the problem, as Ian Punnet had brought up. Okay, it's one thing to put the data out there, but you need someone to look at the data, explain it, and that's one of the reasons why you're here. All right, I'm going to take a brief break here because there's some other information we're going to talk about. That's 30-hour outreach training.
In the professional safety community, communication and planning are just a few keys to your program's success. The question many practitioners have is, where do I start? Dr. Jay Allen, the creator of the Safety FM platform and host of the Rated R Safety Show, has built a global foundation to help you along the way. Go to safetyfm.com and listen to some of the industry's best and most involved professionals, including Blaine Hoffman with the Safety Pro, Sam Goodman with the Hop Nerd, Sheldon Primus with the Safety Consultant, Jim Pozell with Safety Wars, Emily Elrod with Unapologetically Bold, and many others. As individuals, we can do great things, but as a team, we become amazing. Dial into safetyfm.com today and surround yourself with a powerful force of knowledge and support.
OSHA recordables, first aid cases, catastrophic losses. You want answers? So do I. This is Jim Pozell with Safety Wars. Okay, I didn't know that is 15. What was it? 20 years ago today. 20. How many? 18. 20 years ago today, Fred Rogers died. He would have been 94 had he lived. 2003. So 20 years ago today. Well, rest in peace, Fred Rogers. I remember watching him. Anyway, let's talk about OSHA 30-hour training, 10-hour training. So as everybody here probably knows, and if you want OSHA 10-hour and 30-hour training, give us a call, 845-269-5772, or email me at jim@safetywars.com. It's very frustrating to me, right? And to legitimate trainers. There's a lot of misunderstanding. It's not the person on taking the class. They're misunderstanding so much. Sometimes things get misunderstood. But it's people on my end that have a problem with communicating it. So OSHA has 4 areas for outreach training. And this is federal OSHA. States have different requirements. Some of the states and some of the industries, some of the facilities require OSHA outreach training to even be eligible to work with, to even work in the industry. So I worked at a facility. You needed 10-hour training. You needed 30-hour training for another one, construction, or you needed PSM training, which is another training. It's not outreach training, but PSM, process safety management training with that. And what the idea is to make you aware of the hazards, and it's an awareness level training. You're not actually certified to do anything. So what happens often is, and it's with unscrupulous safety companies and safety professionals, they said, yeah, we're going to give you training. They tell that to an entry-level person. They send them to a 30-hour course, and they come out of the 30-hour course. Now I am an expert on safety. That's an awareness level training course. Every one of these courses is supposed to be different, and it's supposed to be specific to what you're doing. So, for example, there's construction, general industry, maritime, and disaster response. So, for example, if you are doing concrete construction, you're probably going to be talking a little bit about concrete hazards, silica hazards, and within the guidelines, so many hours this, so many hours this, and respirable crystalline silica. If, however, you are another construction trade, a glazer, all right, or a lather, all right, or lather, right, with the rebar, your focus is going to be a lot different. You're may not worried about respirable crystalline silica on those jobs, right? So much. Respiratory protection, not even required with that. All right, so this is an awareness level. So often what happens is companies say, yes, my employees are trained. They have a 30-hour course. Well, guess what? That doesn't include scaffolding competent person. Any competent person for that matter. There's like 27 different areas that you need for construction. That doesn't include fall protection competent person. That does not include aerial or boom lifts. That does not include respirable crystalline silica, right? You may mention it, respirable crystalline silica, for 5 minutes, but that's not the full-blown training. Permit required confined space entry. You may mention it for a couple hours. You may talk about it maybe for 3 hours. But OSHA, if you go to the OSHA course, that's a 3-day course. If you go to an OSHA outreach center like Rutgers, it's a three-day course, 2.5, 3-day course. You go to any of the other ones out there, it's a week-long course for that, for some of the places. So that's, you're not getting actual training. You're getting awareness training. Like, oh, this is what you need to look at. Something else that you're supposed to be getting. Back in the day, it was like 2 hours. Intro to OSHA, where we were supposed to go through, and we're supposed to tell you a little bit of record keeping and things of that nature. A lot of trainers don't even go over that because the curriculum is very loosey-goosey. I run into companies that run into an issue where they don't even do the outreach. When they did the outreach training, they didn't know about reporting. This is not through no fault of their own, right? They're going here. They get sold. Oh yeah, I'm going to be 30-hour trained. I'm going to know so much about this, and they go there. There's a lot of stuff that they don't know about. That's where a professional person on staff has value. This way, for example, if you're going to have a hospitalization, an in-person hospitalization, I don't mean going into an emergency room, because an emergency room in a hospital is not necessarily an admission into the hospital, right? And there's different interpretations for that, and that's a long story. But they get admitted into the hospital, like overnight, something like that, for surgery, what have you, right? Overnight, for other than not, right? You had to call OSHA within 24 hours of that incident. That's an issue here, all right? Another point that's not what the employer's responsibilities are under OSHA. That's often not talked about, right? So if you're an employer class, so let's say that you're teaching a class full of employers, often, the employer, depending on how it is, a trainer, and I've seen it happen, trainer will say, well, your employees are all responsible for their own safety. And I was in here in the men's room, and there's that sign, and you have a mirror on it. The person in this mirror is is the person responsible for their own safety. And this is what the employee's responsibility are. And that's how it's taken. Oh, employer, not too much. And then you get the other end. You're the employee, and they say, well, hey, the employer is responsible for everything, blah, 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 blah. But if you're an employer, it's incumbent on you to figure out what your legal responsibilities are. So, for example, in New York, it's one of the few states out there that if you're a competent person and you screw it up, good chance that someone gets killed, you could go to jail. The state will enforce that. All right? Maybe you should know that. And, we're not supposed to go into local stuff on the, during the OSHA outreach training. OSHA doesn't refer a lot of things over to the Justice Department for prosecution. Something like 700 in the last 50 years, 700 cases. Not an awful lot. The number is off, but it's something like that, in that range. Maybe you should know that. There's a lot of stuff that should be talked about, right? Maybe it's appropriate for the 30-hour outreach course. Maybe it isn't. But what's my point? My point is, if you're the employer, there's a lot more that's going on in there. So if you're a trainer, and again, we give training to all this stuff here. I give it. With that, you're supposed to know that. First aid CPR training. Unless you have a 3 to 4 minute response from emergency responders like an EMT or something, you got to have first aid CPR training. Some designated people for that. Wow. There's a lot of stuff that goes on that you need to know and you need to do outside that 30-hour course. So don't think that, oh, yeah, I took the 30-hour course and blah, 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 blah. Now, in New York City, there are people who are still, right? So New York City has a 30-hour requirement, 30-hour outreach requirement under the Department of Buildings stuff. And on the DEP, the same thing. There's still people out there that I talked to. Yeah, my boss fought them off the street, these 30-hour cards. Really? Can I see it? No. Oh. Right? There's so don't think that because someone has a 30-hour card, they actually know what's going on. Right? So because of the varied quality of those training classes out there. I mean, Daily News had it right, safety for sale. Right, 13 years ago now. You can Google that, right? 13, 14 years ago now. So that's something you need to remember. All of this stuff. What kind of training do I need? What kind of training do I have? What do I need? If you're the employer, you're supposed to know that. Now, you also get the situation with human resources. I run into this often. I'm an MBA. I know everything that's going on in here. And then you figure out, well, they know what they don't know. Well, did you do this? Do you know this? Do you know? Because MBA programs normally do not cover, and human resource programs don't really go into OSHA in depth. That's where you need a safety professional guiding you along on that. And that's where you run into things. And I've run into a lot of HR people that, right, if they're working with me, I'll sit down with the HR people. We'll have the HR people actually go through the 30-hour course. Some of the other trainings, I'll give them a list. Things for one of my clients, I got all the office people that handle clients and stuff like that. Got them all together. We're going to explain what all the training is and what OSHA is and everything else. So you're able to get through all of that. But anyway, this is what I wanted to talk about. I'm back. I'm not going to be on every day this week, but I will be on a majority of the days live. That's what's going on. And I just wanted to thank everybody for the ongoing support. And this Friday, we are celebrating 2 years on the air. And I want to thank everybody for their support if you don't listen on Friday. So, we'll be back, God willing, tomorrow, fighting that safety war. See you tomorrow.
The views and opinions expressed on this podcast are those of the host and its guest and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of the company. Examples of analysis discussed within this podcast are only examples. They should not be utilized in the real world as the only solution available, as they are based only on very limited and dated open source information. Assumptions made within this analysis are not reflective of the position of the company. No part of this podcast may be reproduced, stored in a retrieval system, or transmitted in any form or by any means, mechanical, electronic, recording, or otherwise, without prior written permission of the creator of the podcast, Jay Allen.